Hello everybody, my name is Rebecca Beall and I work here at Old Sturbridge Village as the collections manager and curator of textiles. Today we brought out 3 dresses from our collection, and it might surprise you to note that the one thing that they have in common is that they are all purportedly wedding dresses worn from between the early 1830s up through the early 1840s. And the thing that might surprise you about that is that they are not all white. Today, when we think of the modern wedding dress, we immediately think of white or off-white as being the traditional color. And really that tradition has its roots in the mid-19th century with Queen Victoria. She married Prince Albert in 1840 and wore a beautiful white lavish wedding gown for her nuptials. And after that, that tradition started to take hold of wearing a white dress symbolizing purity and a fresh start. But it should be noted that even today, throughout the globe, white is not the only traditional wedding color. Many cultures wear red or yellow or blue, symbolizing everything from fertility to good luck and fortune on the wedding day. In the early 19th century in New England, particularly in rural areas, weddings were much smaller affairs than we typically think of today. In fact, a lot of times the wedding would be taking place in probably the bride's home in a parlor, with a small number of family and maybe some friends as witnesses. The clothing that the bride would wear, depending on her economic level, would be anything from her best dress that she might already have, in anything from a silk to maybe a printed cotton or a wool, or possibly a dress that was created for the wedding, or if you had the money, possibly a newer wardrobe to go with the wedding. But the thing that's going to remain consistent is that that dress is going to be your nicest dress, and it is intended to be worn more than once. So today when we think of a wedding dress, we think of something that is very fancy, worn once, and then gets preserved for future generations. But in the 19th century, they were a lot more practical about what they were choosing to wear, and realizing that dedicating a dress to one day might not be as frugal as being able to take that dress and alter it and wear it for many successive years. So the interesting thing about the 3 dresses in front of me is that they all do show some evidence of modification, some more than others, showing that they probably were worn over subsequent years as the wearer's nicest dress, even though it had been worn for a wedding. So the earliest wedding dress that we have here on display is an 1831 dress worn by Potter Marino. She was married in Bristol, Rhode Island in 1831. And even though it is a white silk gown, that really is probably just her own taste and her own choice rather than a prevailing tradition. The interesting thing about this gown is that it has been significantly altered. It came to the village with 2 sets of sleeves, a short pair and the long pair that's currently attached to the gown, indicating that it would have been intended to be worn multiple times, and you could switch out the sleeves depending on the occasion. The long sleeves that you see here had scalloped cuffs on them, and at some point in the dress's history, the scalloped cuffs were removed. One of them was put on the back of the dress, which widens the dress about 3 to 4 inches. At that time, the waist was let out, and gathers in some areas were turned into wider pleats. So that, again, expanded the waistline a little bit. At her neckline, there are small discrete tucks that just change the neckline slightly. So that indicates that this dress probably was worn for multiple years after Hope's wedding. The dress to Hope's left, the olive green figured silk, was worn by Julia Ann. She married a gentleman by the name of Jabez Eldridge in 1837. Unfortunately, Jabez died in 1838, not long after they were married, and she married in 1840 a gentleman by the name of Salem Hammond. This dress could have been worn for either of those weddings. It was passed down in the Hammond family, so it's very possible that it was worn at that 1840 wedding. And this too shows some evidence of being remade or reworked in certain ways, especially at the waist, where you can see lines of old stitching in that silk. The other neat thing about this dress is that it has a removable cape, and that indicates that it's something that was meant to be worn in different capacities depending on the occasion. The dress in the center is a dress that was worn by Diantha, who was married in Charlton in 1843. She married a gentleman by the name of Robert Craig, and you can see the distinct difference between the 1830s dress with the lovely, beautiful full sleeves and the 1840s sleeve, which is much straighter. But even this dress shows some evidence of some alterations, particularly in the hem, with some tucks that appeared to have been moved, letting the skirt out or taking the skirt up, depending on the wearer. All three of these dresses are silk, which would have been a lovely choice for any sort of fancier occasion, afternoon tea at a friend's house, going to a meeting on Sunday. So all three of these dresses certainly would have been worn multiple times well after the wedding.